So I'm here in my room. My computer's turned on in front of me. I've got my microphone and camera set up. My notepad is open. It's got notes about my podcast. It's Time to Rewind. Looks like they're open to the 26th scene of Memento that starts in black and white at 55 minutes and 37 seconds, with Leonard talking about the police failing to follow up on John G., and ends at 56 minutes and 28 seconds with Leonard questioning his report. And hang on. Who is this?
Bubba! It's Lisa Leaheey, your co-host. You know me. I'm from Rabbit Hole Podcasts.
Oh, of course. Although I prefer to be called Bubbawheat. And who is this?
This is Andy Nelson from Marvel Movie Minute, joining you yet again to talk about Memento.
Of course. Welcome back. And who are you?
I'm Pete Wright, and I'm also from the Marvel Movie Minute, and I'm very anxious about where we go from here. Very anxious. Social anxiety through the moon.
Well, we finally get a minute, almost a minute, 51 seconds.
This is more familiar territory for us.
This is just a bounty of content for us to talk about today.
Bounty.
I think we should start with talking about Pete's needle phobia.
Guys, this is the worst.
Yeah. Fact 5 right there.
Yeah,
Oof.
I don't care for it, especially because it's, oh, God, at right about 4 or 5 seconds, the colon. Why is he leaning in so hard on the colon?
It's a very important punctuation.
Well, I'm honestly, I talked about this on our first week, but his technique is not very good because you should be going straight in at a 90-degree angle, but I'm nearly certain that the reason that he's going at an angle, and you can kind of see, is that he's pressing the needle into his skin, but it's at an angle, so that way he's not actually breaking the skin. Right. But he is able to holding it at an angle, and they probably dulled the needle as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that just to make it a little bit safer. But that way he's able to get a pretty good indent into his skin to make it, to give the illusion that that we're just not seeing the needle break through, but the needle does break through off camera.
So you're saying Guy Pearce is not a method actor? Noted.
No,
he doesn't have fact 5 still written on his side.
Or at least the colon, because they wrote fact, but then he actually did the colon himself because that's what they filmed.
Just wanders around with a colon on his leg to this day.
You get in a note or a thing, and you've just been so angry, and you've just really punctuate that sentence. This is the way he feels about the colon.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, so funny.
Yeah, so this scene in general, it really shows the difficulties of someone with his condition trying to follow the plot of something large like this police report, which we can see that it's very hefty. It's got a lot of pages to try and sort through, and there's at least 50 pages because in terms of missing pages that he has written down, he has pages 53, 54, and 55 written as missing pages. So it's at least that many pages, which is a lot to try and go through if you can only remember things for about 10 to 15 minutes at a time.
It's certainly no commercial. It is more like the plot to Green Acres here.
Yeah, I marvel that, as I see all of this paperwork, I really marvel that he remembers that he has this and remembers so much detail from it as he's going through. I mean, obviously he's referencing it, but that's something that is interesting here is like how much that he still kind of has locked in his head. I guess it was at that point in his the illness where some of this was still permeating through,
Yeah, I find it that part of it interesting because it's that combination of, stuff that he knows. And, I have, written down as much as I was able to copy from what were shown on screen here, in this basically this summary page in front, which I think it's interesting that it does cover a lot of what we learn throughout the movie. I think it's, in that way, it's very well written, and it looks great because it's, you can see that the way that it's written, you can tell that different things were written at different times and with different pens. Even though it all looks like his handwriting, some of the handwriting looks, slightly different depending on the frame of mind that he was in whenever he was writing.
Right. That tighter script is, we find out that this is something he uses when he's kind of rushed and just sort of disregarding what it is that he's writing down. So those particular lines are going to be something that he was under pressure to write down at the time.
Yeah. And there's also a little bit of, switching back and forth between print and cursive in a few moments that I see here, because a lot of what we see, for the most part on all the Polaroids is all print, and this does have a bit where he will dip into cursive here and there.
Yeah, which and some of it, like the more factual stuff, does seem like he had more time, so he prints it. The drugs found in trunk, but then the things where it's just like there, you can tell there's a little more of an emotional reaction to it, and why he's writing it. He's rushed, and just the emotion. Like, I told them everything I remembered, things like that. It's like you can get a sense how there might be more emotion in that, as opposed to just the factual drugs found in trunk.
Yeah, and it's also this conflict. Basically, him looking at this report is like the conflict between present Leonard and past Leonard, because present Leonard doesn't fully trust the fact that past Leonard was the one that was crossing out information that he felt to be irrelevant. He thinks that there's some, maybe somebody else crossed these out, or maybe there was something that he's hiding, where, past Leonard most likely just crossed them out because he thought it was irrelevant, and in order to save time. Like, he thought that he was doing future Leonard a favor by crossing out this irrelevant information, but now present Leonard is looking at past Leonard and is like, why did you do that? And then he's wasting time trying to figure out what's missing, rather than trusting that he did what needed to be done.
Well, and then he also suggests that he's not the one who crossed things out. Right. You have some of those redacted pages, and he's under, like, I don't know who crossed these out. He's suggesting, because there's missing pages, and later on he accuses, Teddy of taking pages out. And there's this element where it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. I'm the one who's focused. I'm the one who's going to solve this mystery. Why would I make this mystery any harder? Yeah. And it really, when you start getting toward the end of the film, and it really gets to the heart of what he's really doing.
I think that's a really important observation, that this movie, in dealing with memory, is also dealing peripherally with dissociative identity disorder. Like, this is, like, every day he wakes up and he is essentially a different person. And if you read what, some of the psychological community is, right, like Adrienne Fletcher has just written a book that's just come out. And I only know because we're thinking about booking her for a podcast. And it's her personal lived experience of dealing with DID, and how, like, you watch what he's going through in this movie, and it's her experience of like, every day he's separating another part from himself, keeping at arm's length the manipulators of his of what he's doing, because confronting those manipulators would mean becoming aware that he's the one that's been doing this all along. And I think it's just fascinating how well they are able to craft this experience of dealing with memory as dealing with person, and how memories are so core to who we are as people. It's lovely and threatening, terrifying all at once.
It's an interesting way to pair with it that sentence that he says when he's sitting with Teddy at the diner, and he says, memory is unreliable. Well, so are people.
Yes.
It fits right in with what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then besides the, his conclusions page, we also get just a very brief shot of this blank psychiatric report, which this is part of the design that they used for the special edition DVD, which I do love. Or on the DVD, this is filled out, but here, looking at it, I mean, we only see like the very top part, but it looks like it's blank here.
It's
interesting.
It's fun. I mean, it is really interesting to just see how much stuff he actually has managed to access, as he's been kind of pursuing all of this. And I mean, he gives us information here, like, I can get stuff from the cops. It was very easy in my job, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of an interesting aspect to it, and it makes sense why he would have all this stuff. But it also, for a person like this, for a person who's on this very specific journey, it does make you a little nervous that he has access to so much stuff, because there's a lot that he can, and as we see, will do with all of this. And as he does start redacting information, and as his future self starts mistrusting the information, and I mean, it's an interesting journey for somebody like this with this affliction to go on that is crafted well. And when you see things like that, that psychiatric report in here, it's just like, wow, he really does have access to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's worth kind of exploring this sheet of paper, because I find it fascinating and really well crafted. And like in the top left corner, we have basically his tattoo facts. We see name John or James, and then there's a little box with an arrow pointing to it, to the James name that says new. And you can see that in his tattoo, that's the James was tattooed later. White male in late 20s, drugs found in the car. And then it's harder to see the ones below that because they're blurry. But then there's the bracket with an arrow. And next to that, it points to, it says, these are so far what I know that I believe to be true. And I know is underlined, but I think it's funny that, that is like not an oxymoron, but that's like two contrasting statements.
Yeah. The facts
that I know, which I believe.
And then in the top right corner, there's it looks like detective, and then I can't make out the name, but I'm guessing that it's the name of a detective with a phone number.
And it says uncontactable.
Yeah.
So whoever this person is useless to him anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
There's a second name, like Officer Clemson, and what does that say? Chime?
Yeah, I think it says Officers Gleason and Klein.
Gleason, thank you.
Yeah. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so these are, and I think it's interesting that none of those names are Officer Gamble.
No.
Right.
And because Teddy does tell him that he was the detective assigned to the initial case, which, looking at this, that calls that statement into question. And, Teddy's already an unreliable character, but that kind of calls his character even more into question. That he doesn't have Officer Gamble's information on this conclusions page at all.
And have you talked about the fact that it's labeled conclusions? Like, it seems so final, like nothing written on this page.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah. And then some other facts on the lower half of the sheet. One dead man found in our bathroom. Jacket blue with mask, height unknown. My gun was found. Getaway car was found. Drugs found in trunk, 15 ounces of marijuana, 2 kilos of heroin.
Oh, hey now.
Oh. Yeah.
Access to drugs.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Talked about that a few weeks ago. There it is.
Yep.
Yeah, which I am surprised that 2 kilos of heroin that feels like that should immediately point to a drug dealer rather than
Yeah, exactly.
stolen car, prints on car, police aren't looking for, and you can't read the rest of that sentence. My report, I told them everything I remembered. I had been asleep. Bed was cold, half hour at the least.
I think the police aren't looking for it. I think it's John G. right after that, which he says here. But you can kind of make it out. You can start seeing
and you can
it.
also infer it based on because all these are things that he's told other characters throughout the course of the movie. Yeah. Especially the fact that he had been asleep, and I think it's either the scene right before or right after this that it is. I think right after this of him recreating the him waking up with the escort.
Yeah, right.
And then we have check these pages with a few numbers listed, and then 12 missing pages, and all of those numbered pages written out, and that's pretty much all I can make out.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more, there's a few notes, just like in big letters, irrelevant at one point, and there's a BS with spelled out with exclamation points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand that, like, for a person whose mind is working the way it is, that things might be a little scattered, but I do question, like, for somebody who is, trying to put a puzzle together, you think that he would have started working on something that was a little more structured.
I'm thinking about that, Andy, because I mean, that's true, but also, like, it's an interesting, back to the dissociation, like, it's an interesting examination of how it might have taken a team to get this far, right? Like,
sure.
Like, he's incapable of presenting anything structured because the structure evaporates at the end of every day.
It's like as soon as he starts to build the structure, then 10 minutes later he will forget what the structure was for.
Yeah. Metaphorically, it feels like on day one he had a map and he laid a transparency on top of it and made a bunch of notes and circled a bunch of places, and the next morning all he had was the transparency, right?
It's a great metaphor. Yeah.
No map left. And I think that's what so much of the black and white stuff is indicating as we're moving through time with him, is the fractured nature and the incompleteness of his ability to process anything, and yet to be so dogged and confident about every next step.
I mean, not to mention the fact that the police report would have been structured.
Yes.
True.
Like, he had a structure to begin with that he has now dismantled.
Yes.
And he's trying to figure out why these pages are missing, or why this stuff is redacted, why is that crossed out, and this idea of creating this puzzle that has missing pieces. I mean, you're only going to ever get so far.
Yeah,
Truly.
that's true.
Yeah, that's literally, like, you literally took the words out of my mouth. That's he and I think it's what they mention at the end of the movie as well. It's like he is creating this. He's creating a puzzle
he can never solve.
That he will not be able.
Yep.
Yeah.
The line is, to create
So
a puzzle
that way,
you could never solve.
Yeah. So that way he's always just in this. He's basically created this life for him because this gives his life meaning and purpose.
Right. Because without this, what's he going to do?
Right.
He doesn't have anything to drive him. So if he does not have this puzzle, he's just going to kind of float.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if he's not trying to solve his wife's murder, then he's just in a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah, crazy.
And there is one other thing near the beginning of this clip that I think it's something that stands out to me that I find just a little weird, and it's the way that Guy Pearce says the line, "Well, sir, that's certainly in keeping with my own discoveries." Does that not sound like Leonard to anybody else, or maybe it sounds more like insurance investigator Leonard?
Yeah, it's such like a deferent kind of tone.
Yes.
That, sir, it's like, who is he speaking to? And he's calling this person sir. So there's an assumption that they've introduced themselves to him.
Yeah.
And so he has some sort of authority, this person on the phone. And he's absolutely, bowing to his, sorry, my words are difficult today. he's bowing to this guy's authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially whenever you think that, the most likely explanation for the person on the other end of the phone is Teddy.
Right.
Like, can you imagine him calling Teddy sir at any point in time throughout the rest of the movie?
That's a really good point. Like, those are the little bits of Guy Pearce's sort of performative attention that, it's that we know the lines are written the way they are, but the fact that he brings that identity forward, right? That insurance investigator forward, it's a blink and you miss it kind of a moment, but it's really important to the fabric of the story that he's telling himself, and how he interprets the world.
Yeah. And I think on another level, I think the way that he says it and the way that he's talking to this unknown, I can't even call it a voice because we never hear the voice on the phone, but this unknown presence on this phone is that, the way that Leonard as a character treats this presence with respect. It lends them, gives them more authority, and it makes you, because Leonard seems to trust this presence, then it makes the audience trust this presence, even though we don't ever hear them.
Oh, we have no choice. He's our protagonist, and so whatever it is he trusts, so do we. We have to go along for the ride.
It does make me wonder what Teddy's side of the conversation sounds like, though, or assuming it is Teddy, but and especially, we know from our conversation over these few weeks that there was an interruption at some point, and he had to get off the phone and then called back, and so. It's interesting that there's I don't know, I'm always curious, like, what is he calling for? What is where is he hoping that he'll kind of nudge Leonard toward with each of these calls, and and structurally, we talked about earlier in our conversations over these weeks about the whole note about the drugs angle, and here it is, bringing up this angle with the drugs, and it's like, yeah, well, sir, that certainly fits into my understandings, and goes to the page that has drugs written on it, and so it's interesting how there is this level of kind of Nolan as Teddy, like how he's guiding the conversation along in a very smartly structured way.
Yeah, it's good that you brought that up. That's something that I forgot to write down as a note. But yeah, we do. Watching this multiple times, the most likely answer is that it is Teddy. But not only that, but like you said, that Teddy's half of the conversation, and his motive is that he is basically leading Leonard towards Jimmy.
Yeah. And still, I still, wonder, like, where did he go? Did he just have to go to the bathroom and just like, I'll just call back? Or as he's having conversations with Leonard, does he hit these points where, like, this is a dead end? I'm going to make an excuse to get off the phone, call him back, and he'll never know, and I can start nudging him. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that is exactly what Teddy is doing. And then, I'm just gonna flat out call his unknown presence Teddy, because that,
I think that's safe.
I think that's where that's where the movie leads you, and that's really the only possible explanation within the context of this movie. And I do think that that's right, that he is giving himself these breaks in order to basically start over and try again and lead him further down. It's almost I hadn't thought about this until just now, but like from Teddy's perspective, it's almost like a Groundhog Day for him.
Yeah, right.
Because each time he interacts with Leonard, it's like, starting over from the very beginning again. So it's like Teddy's in his own little Groundhog Day where he's repeating these same conversations and getting just a little bit farther each time, trying different conversation tracks in order to get him to the conclusion that he wants.
But he does get to keep telling the same jokes.
Yeah, they're always funny.
Right.
And then I didn't really look too much at some of the printed pages because they go by really fast and they're hard to read and it's it's not something that as an audience that you're really meant to read, but the one that I happen to have it paused on, I think it seems to be like part of the medical report where it's got like common carotid artery, internal carotid artery, external carotid artery, minimal changes, severe changes, and then different lines are crossed out. And basically, either I imagine it's either describing injuries to him or his wife. And like, look, what little I could see at some of the reports, it's really hard to make sense of what is crossed out and what isn't crossed out. And I feel like they spent a lot of time on the handwritten conclusions page, but I think that this might be a little bit more random. I think what's written is relevant to the movie and relevant to the case, but I think what's crossed out might be a bit more random, just to give a visual clue and not necessarily like if you looked at this page, you might not, you might think, well, why is this line crossed out and this is not crossed out?
Yeah. That would make sense because visually, it goes by so fast that we're never given a chance to really see the words unless, as we're doing for the purposes of this, kind of freeze framing on it where you can read some of the stuff. It just looks like medical pages, medical examiner stuff, and that somebody has gone through here and redacted some of it. And I think that's all we're intended to glean from it.
The problem is that we also know that Nolan is notorious for his attention to detail in these kinds of things. So, of course, because we found it somewhere else, we're going to be looking for those things. And I have to wonder, like, just how much thought does he and Jonathan put into, these kinds of explorations? Because, I mean, so much of this stuff is intentional. So, Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't taken the time to explore some of the extra special features on the DVD. I just haven't had as much time, and plus the fact that you really have to have a guide to figure out how to how to get there on the second disc. So I don't know if there's any other. I know that it does have the script, but that's also kind of hard to follow along for research purposes because it's the way they have it on the DVD is it's basically shows you the script page as the movie plays. So it's harder. Yeah, so it's not like it's a PDF where you can flip through the pages. You kind of have to have it while the movie is playing and. Yeah.
It's a bouncing ball kind of a walk through.
Yeah, although what little I did see, it does look nice because it's like it's the shooting script, but it also has like handwritten notes on various pages. So I think it is something that's worth checking out, but it's a little bit harder to do for this format because it's harder to really jump to the scene that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I think that's all I have. Do either of you have anything else, or I'll give you a moment if you want to talk about anything else throughout the rest of the movie. that give you the chance here, since this is your last week with us?
I don't think I have anything else, but it's just this is one of those films that just kind of it was just kind of a lightning bolt when you watch it. It's just like it's such an amazing thing to kind of experience and see and think about, and the casting was just magnificent. Seeing not just who were not just this part where we're really only getting to see Guy Pearce, but really like the full cast. I mean, everybody just plays it so well, and moving back and forth between the color and black and white. I find it to be just a special film. It is really exciting every time to revisit it. So I don't have any other things specific about anything else. I just really enjoy kind of the full scope of it.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you on the lightning bolt too. I mean, this movie felt like a revelation, when it came out, and it absolutely holds up for me. Absolutely holds up. And I was much chagrined to read so many of the Letterboxd reviews of people who are talking about this movie as trash. Those people, shame on those people.
Shame.
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us this week and these past 4 weeks. It's been a pleasure. It's been a good conversation, even though these scenes, for the most part, have been a lot shorter than you're used to talking about, even in the minute-by-minute formats. But I will give you one last chance to let everybody else know where else they can find you online.
Thank you. Yeah. As we said, we have our Movies by Minutes show, Marvel Movie Minute. You can find that at marvelmovieminute.com, and also over, just as Pete mentioned last week, over on our network, truestory.fm. All of our entertainment podcasts are in there, and so you can just check that out. But yeah, Marvel Movie Minute, we're covering the Avengers. So jump in, tune in. We'll probably be getting close to the 2-hour mark by the time this episode releases.
It's close, so close. Our other movie podcast is The Next Reel, and by the time this airs, we will be talking about, I think, deep ensconced in Mission Impossible. And we'll be gearing up for the next big release.
And thank you, Lisa, as always, for joining me as my co-host here.
Thank you for having me, Bubbawheat. It's always a pleasure, and I love that the shorter the clip, the more guests we have. I see what you did there. I like this technique. Kudos to you, sir.
No problem. And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have any sort of discussions about time loops in general. And until next time, I assume I've already told you about Memento?
Only every time I see you.
Well, sir, that had certainly been in keeping with some of my own discoveries.